Good morning, and thank you for tuning into this recorded sermon for Sunday, June 15th, 2025. My name is Bob Malone, and I'm the pastor here at Mount Vernon Presbyterian Church. And as always, on behalf of our entire church family, we welcome you, and we hope that you will hear from the Spirit of God this morning in profoundly powerful ways. Today's message comes to us from, once again, the book of Acts. I'll be reading selected verses from chapters 4 and 5. Listen now for all that the Spirit is saying to you. Now the whole group of those who believed were of one heart and soul, and no one claimed private ownership of any possessions, but everything they owned was held in common. There was not a needy person among them. For as many as owned lands or houses sold them and brought the proceeds of what was sold. They laid it at the apostles' feet, and it was distributed to each as any had need. There was a Levite from Cyprus, Joseph, to whom the apostles gave the name Barnabas. He sold a field that belonged to him, then brought the money and laid it at the apostles' feet. But a man named Ananias, with the consent of his wife Sapphira, sold a piece of property. And with his wife's knowledge, Ananias kept back some of the proceeds and brought only a part and laid it at the apostles' feet. Ananias, Peter asked, why has Satan filled your heart to lie to the Holy Spirit and to keep back part of the proceeds of the land? While it remained unsold, did it not remain your own? After it was sold, were not the proceeds at your disposal? How is it that you have contrived this deed in your heart? You did not lie to us, but to God. Now when Ananias heard these words, he fell down and died. And great fear seized all who heard it. The young men came and wrapped up his body and then carried him out and buried him. After about 3 hours, Ananias' wife came in, not knowing what had happened. Peter said to her, tell me whether you and your husband sold the land for such and such a price. Sapphira said, yes, that was the price. Then Peter said to her, how is it that you have agreed together to put the Spirit of the Lord to the test? Look, the feet of those who have buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out. Immediately she fell down at his feet and died. When the young men came and found her dead, they carried her out and buried her beside her husband. Great fear seized the whole church and all who heard of these things. Friends, this is the word of the Lord and the poetry of the faithful. Thanks be to God. Ananias and Sapphira. I don't know about you, but to me it seems as though their faces are everywhere today. In office buildings and boardrooms, in hospitals and universities, in small businesses and large corporations, throughout the halls of Congress, and dare I say, even in the White House. They are the faces of ladder climbers. People who seem to only think of themselves. People who seem to be only concerned with their well-being. People who have placed limits or boundaries upon who we actually believe to be our neighbors. They are the faces of people who seem to have forgotten what we call the common good. The belief that none of us succeeds unless all of us succeed. One of the most important teachings of Jesus, that the way we treat the least of these is the way we treat God. It is a measure of our love for God. This morning, and for the next several weeks, we are going to continue reading through the opening chapters of the book of Acts, having begun last week with the story of Pentecost. Today we see that after experiencing the fresh winds of the Spirit, calling the 11 remaining disciples as well as that new one, Matthias, to reimagine and reinvent the future, today we now begin to catch a glimpse of what this future is going to look like. And the story of Ananias and Sapphira reveals just how important caring for one another really is. They are also called out for lying, but that is another sermon for another day. I have no doubt that over the next 3.5 years, there will be plenty of opportunities to address that more than relevant issue. Today, I just want to focus on the importance of our caring for others. Because we are told in this morning's passage that among the believers, everything they owned was held in common, and there was not a needy person among them. Now, like so many of the passages that we've been dealing with lately, the story of Ananias and Sapphira is just that. It's a story. Many biblical scholars and theologians do not believe that God punishes in as harsh and dramatic manner as the story might lead one to believe. And I happen to agree with them. Some would also contend that in today's world, the notion of everyone pooling their paychecks and sharing everything they have is not a very realistic idea either. But regardless, the story has a profound message for we people of faith, and especially for ladder climbers. It did generations ago, and it still does today. In fact, especially today. Excuse me. I'm so sorry. One commentary that I read on the passage says that this story is one that seeks to underscore the serious breach that occurs when members of a community lie to one another and hoard their personal possessions. And that commentary sums up the story pretty nicely. In chapter 4 of Acts, the reader is told that Jesus' followers did not consider their possessions to be their own, but rather they held all that they had in common, so that they would be able to care for those who had real need, so that they could make sure that everyone was being cared for. And Ananias and Sapphira violated that communal value. They rebelled against the way of Jesus, and they lied about it to their community because apparently they were only thinking of themselves. And while that is certainly something that we are all prone to do now and again, today, it seems to be happening way too often, and in profoundly harmful ways. It seems almost expected, if not at least accepted, and by powerful people who are in positions of great authority. And while this kind of selfish thinking, this narcissistic way of being and existing in the world, while they tempt all of us all the time, this go around, what we are experiencing right now, today, it seems to have been birthed right here in our area. And without being overly simplistic this morning, I think it has something to do with our forgetting one of the most important elements of our faith and of our country's founding documents, namely, the common good. When the preamble to our Constitution speaks of promoting the general welfare and securing the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, it is seeking to lift up what was believed to be one of the central roles of government, namely, that it exists not just to protect individual rights, but to serve the collective well-being of all people. And back then, when our nation was founded, it was rare for governments to recognize this responsibility. And while our founders didn't understand it completely, they didn't fully understand the importance of what they were saying. They hadn't come to the place where they could give those same rights and liberties to women or to people of color. At least they were beginning to see the light. At least they were beginning to recognize the role that the government needed to play in the pursuing of the common good. And that was not a new idea, right? The idea that everyone deserved to be cared for, it didn't just pop into the heads of men like Thomas Jefferson or James Madison 250 years ago out of the blue. Those who shaped this nation, they came here from supposedly Christian nations, where the teachings of Jesus were pretty clear about such things. They were well-educated men who knew that interest in the common good comes straight from the lips of the Christ, straight from the great religious traditions that were shaping the world, straight from the writings of great philosophers and thinkers. So it wasn't a new concept, just when it applied to the role of government. And this is so important for us to remember, because in God's coming kingdom, it is not just the job of the church to care for others. Doing so is the responsibility of all of us. It is the job of everyone, including our government. And the founders knew that. The common good was what we are all called to pursue. And when one considers where we are today, well, I don't know about you, but it appears as though we need to be looking for some fresh faces to lead us. Because the Ananiases and the Sapphiras, they're everywhere. Last Sunday, I spoke about the fresh winds of the Spirit that are calling us to move from the past into a new future, a future brimming with hope and possibility. And now this morning, our call is to seek fresh faces that can lead us into that future. Faces that reflect the very heart of Jesus, as well as the heart of Jesus' disciples. And at least according to this morning's passage, the heart of his earliest followers as well, because apparently most of them knew that they really were their siblings' keepers. They knew the importance of the common good. Getting ahead, securing their futures, climbing the ladder of success. Those ideas, they were not so individualistically understood, that they were sought at the expense of others getting ahead, or having their futures secured, or climbing ladders of success that might give them hope and sustainability. So what has happened? Why are we where we are today? With companies like Blue Origin spending hundreds of millions of dollars to send celebrities into space for an 11-minute joyride, while people around the world are starving to death. How did we get here? How are we at a place where an administration spends up to $45 million on a military parade that nobody wants, when people are literally living on the very streets down which those tanks rolled last night? Such things should be an outrage to anyone seeking to follow Jesus. And all of this is taking place while a Senate debates a budget that continues to accelerate the wealth gap in our country, allowing billionaires to fill their own coffers with wealth that comes at the expense of the poor. Those who struggle with a debt born in the simple attempt to get an education, or to secure medical coverage, or to purchase a home for their family. How did we get here? How did capitalism become our God? How have we become a people who, upon looking into the mirror, only see the face of Ananias or Sapphira looking back at us? I actually believe there is an answer to those questions. And I am more and more convinced that we will never understand the importance of the common good until we understand the nature of the community that is so central to the kingdom of God. You see, the author of Acts, believed by many to be Luke, he and Paul, Jesus himself, they made it very clear that in God's coming kingdom, there are to be no divisions among us. Everyone is equally important, and no one is ever to be pushed to the margins where their needs would be neglected, overlooked, or forgotten. The good we seek is to be for all. You see, in God's kingdom, there is no us and them. We're all equally important, and we're all deserving of having our needs met. All of us. All of us are deserving, and all means all. There's no native or immigrant. There's no white person or person of color. There's no never Trumper or MAGA, Christian or pagan, Zionist or anti-Semite. There are no divisions. Common means all, and all means all. Now I know this is hard for a nation like ours to understand, a nation consumed by the binary. You see, it's almost as though this idea, this way of thinking is baked into our souls. This idea of us and them, of this or that, right or wrong, good or bad. And when things don't fit into one of the two categories that we have created, well, they're hard for us to accept. We're just not quite sure what to do with them, where to put them. I had coffee this past week with one of our preschool teachers. Neil is from England, and he was telling me that while he is an American citizen, he's still British. And so people aren't quite sure what to do with him. And while he's way too liberal to be a Republican, he said, I'm also not a Democrat. And that just seems to confuse people. We don't know what to do with those whose pronouns don't fit our binary categories of he and she, him and her. We don't know what to do with someone who says that while they love the Jewish people, they cannot support what the Israeli government is doing in Gaza and now Iran. We don't know what to do with people like many folks who are part of this very congregation. People who truly love Jesus with their heart, soul, mind, and strength, but who do not believe that Muslims or Hindus are going to be condemned to some hell for all eternity. We don't know how to move beyond the binary. And when life is so incredibly gray, that inability becomes extremely problematic. When will we all better understand that some things, some people, some perspectives and propositions are not right or wrong, they are just different. And those differences, the differences between us, can never become an excuse for withholding care, concern. They can never become an excuse for withholding love. That is not the way of Jesus. It's not the way individuals are called to behave, nor is it the way governments are called to behave. Perhaps you've seen the meme. When Jesus told us to love our enemies, he knew they were going to be different from us. That's kind of the whole point. Church, until we recognize what community really means and exactly who is part of God's community, namely everyone, until we get to that place, seeking the common good, loving those who are not like us, well, that's going to be extremely problematic. This morning's passage reminds us that meeting the needs of others is central to our life together. In fact, it is the third goal of a Matthew 25 congregation. Remember that? We cannot be so distracted by the first two goals, building congregational vitality and dismantling structural racism, which are both extremely important. We cannot be so consumed by those first two goals that we forget the third one, which is the call to dismantle systemic poverty. That's what caring for those around us is going to involve. Replacing the faces of Ananias and Sapphira with faces that exude kindness, caring and compassion, concern, and concrete steps toward changing whatever systems and structures continue to hold some down and some back. It's all about pursuing the common good, standing up for and with those who are in need. So that is my challenge to you this morning. Who are these people for you? Think about that, and then go and do something about it. When you think of your sphere of influence, your part of the world, your community, your family, your neighborhood, your church, who are those in need? Who are those really struggling financially? And what might God be calling you to do about it? Many of us in this congregation sought to care for Frank Wallace before his sudden death 2 months ago. And it was so beautiful to see, so beautiful to watch. But what about now? What about today? In a more collective way, how are we as a church called to be faithful to this call? When people see us, are they going to be looking into the faces of people who understand the common good, who are willing to pursue that good? A community of people seeking to be obedient to the Spirit's call to provide for those who are in need, those in financial need. Are people going to see that? Or are they only going to see the faces of Ananias and Sapphira? Last month, in Princeton Seminary's commencement address, President Jonathan Walton said this to the graduates: "You are the ones called not to climb the ladder, but to expand the table." Friends, that is our charge as well. Not to keep climbing the ladder, but to be expanding the table. May it be so. Amen. Friends, have a great week, and I'll look forward to seeing you right back here next Sunday morning. Until then, peace.